Hey, everybody, welcome to Real Talk.
Well, we're excited today to have as our guest Christina Crist. She is the executive director of the Team of Mercy. That is a local nonprofit that assists individuals that have lost a loved one to suicide. So welcome, Christina.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about Team of Mercy?
Absolutely. So first off, I want to say that we provide the prevention as well as postvention. And all of our postvention services are actually prevention services to stop suicide within those families. Okay. So what that kind of looks like is we meet people where they're at. And sometimes that means that, the state police or county police, local police are giving our information because a trauma scene cleanup needs to be done. Right. So we are partnered with a local restoration company, locally owned, that will go in and do that for the families. And the reason why we do that, and it might be one of our most important services, is because studies show that individuals that have lost a loved one to suicide and are left to their own devices to clean that up, and if it's a horrific scene, their risk to repeat suicide over 300%.
Wow.
You said that when you said
Mm-hmm.
you made the statement to prevent suicides from not happening in that
Yeah.
family
Yeah.
continuing. Is that
Right.
connected to that?
So
Wow.
100% that's connected to that, right? So we want to prevent that. Not only is an individual suffering because suddenly their loved one has made the decision to take their life. I don't mean to take away from any other death. Death hurts. Doesn't matter if it's an accident, a terminal illness, fill in the blank,
Yeah.
right? But there is another layer when it is suicide. It's a different grief, okay? Because our loved ones have made that choice. Why? We can talk about that later. But so they are dealing with that. And then on top of making, having to clean up a scene, and I'm talking a scene such as a gunshot, something that is going to be leaving body matter behind, or a very graphic scene. So they are at risk to repeat suicide over 300%. That could be days later, months later, years later. But that's ensuring that they are going to really be struggling with that ideation.
Yeah.
Let me ask this question because I have not experienced losing a loved one to that.
Okay.
I have had one conversation with an individual who the suicide took place in a vehicle, and it was
Okay.
their family vehicle, and they had to keep the vehicle.
Yep.
So they called family members in to clean the vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
So that whole thing that you're saying right now is I'm like mind blown because
Yeah.
I didn't even because you don't know that you're going to have to need that service.
You don't know what you
think
don't
about it.
know
Yeah.
until you know it.
Until you know it.
Yeah.
And that is that's why we exist, right? Those are the reasons why we exist and we do what we do, because you're adrenaline, you're a family member, you're a loved one, and you may not be that like one step away. You might be 3 steps away from that person that died by suicide, right? Is that making sense?
Yes.
That you want to come in because you love them all, right? Your adrenaline's pumping. I can do this, right? This is something I can do to help. Because when we lose somebody, what's our first saying? What can I help
Yeah.
with?
You want to help.
Right? That it's like instinctual in us. So yeah, you want to go in, you want to help, not knowing what that's going to do to you.
Yeah.
I do not care who you are. There is no way you can unsee what you've seen. No way. And you have no idea how that's going to affect you, right? You're doing it from the goodness of your heart or, wanting to help and those types of things. But now you have put yourself at risk and didn't even know it.
So do they reach out? I mean, how, I know we'll probably get to this.
Mhm.
I'm just kind of,
That was going to be
Yeah.
my question.
yeah.
How do they get there?
Yeah. How do they get, how do you, who puts in, how does that
does it come
connection
about?
happen?
Yeah.
Great question. Okay. So that's why we work with the police officer so closely. Literally, right now, as we speak, there's training going on at our police department that Team of Mercy is a part of. It's a crisis intervention team. And I am one of 3 people that are certified in our area. And it's a 40-hour training for police officers, right? So tomorrow's my day. I get to go in, I get to train them on suicide prevention and things like that. And they get our information. They know who we are, all of those types of things. And I've been involved in that for several years. So police, definitely word of mouth. Number one, I mean, it's really word of mouth. We are, I would like to say, well known in our area because of the work that we have done. So typically, probably 9 times out of 10, it's going to be a loved one of the family that has been given information or something like that that calls on behalf of the person that's been directly affected. And that other 1% is probably law, some sort of law has made the call.
Okay. Now, is Team of Mercy a national program or is it specific to this area?
It is local. It is a local. Our founder lived in Vigo County and lost her father in a fashion that needed a grave amount of cleanup in Kentucky. And that restoration company took grave advantage of that family. Okay. I mean, grave advantage financially. And I mean, it's financial abuse, really. And so she started the paperwork of the 501c3 to do the trauma scene cleanup because that's how her family was affected.
Wow.
And then shortly thereafter, my 15-year-old daughter, Hannah, took her life and it rocked our community's world, right? They're like, oh my gosh, a 15-year-old. I mean, it was very, very public. So the founder had actually came to Hannah's funeral, and I thank God for that because I wouldn't be where I am today without that. So that's how Team of Mercy services have grown because I was asked the question, what are you going to need? What do you need? And I had enough life experiences in me to know that I needed to be around like-minded people. I didn't need a trauma scene cleanup. My daughter chose to hang herself, which there was no horrific scene behind, right? But I knew that I needed, if I was going to heal and get on the right track, I need to be around people that knew what I was thinking, what I was feeling, all of those things. So there was the birth of our support group, which started right away, and I have not looked back yet. And we're 11 years later.
I'm sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. I think it makes such a huge difference. You know, we talk about lived experiences, and it's one thing to train on markers and things that you need to be looking at, and then it's another thing to look into the face of a mom, of a parent who's lost a child, and can say something that was so powerful, which was, I had enough life left in me and experience left in me to know if I don't do something different, this is going to not end well.
Yeah.
So, well, you know, you shared that statistics with your daughter, and you said that was 2015?
2013.
2013. So what are the, you know, we're streaming from Indiana. We have some national statistics here, but what are the current statistics for suicide?
So it depends on what site that you go on, right? And the ages fluctuate. So I might be off just like 1 or 2 years, okay? And when they collect data, it takes 2 years. So these numbers are from, you know, like 2 years ago, right? So suicide is still the second leading cause of death in the state of Indiana, in between around the ages of 14 to about 34 to 36. Okay. And some studies show that it can be, I think, the 5th leading cause of death as well in our older population.
So like the geriatric, what they consider
Absolutely.
the geriatric population.
Yes.
Yeah.
When terminal illness and those types of things usually kind of come in, or retirement, you know, they've lost their spouse. things like that.
Mm.
So I want to hit on something because we've talked about in some of our other episodes, and you said it, our topic here is mental health and what mental health can do. And like you said, sometimes we may know why our loved one chooses that route, and sometimes you never know why they choose that route. So one of the questions or one of the statements that you made earlier was, I'm glad no one said XYZ to me. So one of the questions that we have is, how do you walk beside someone who's going through the grief of losing or even almost losing a loved one to suicide? So you have your completed suicide attempt, and then you have your attempt
Right.
where it doesn't have. So if you could speak to, because to me, and I think Pastor Brittany falls in the same category, I'm a youth leader at my church. So youth are at the core of what I do. And when I heard the statistic initially of 14, that was a leading cause for 14-year-olds, I'm looking at my babies and I have 30 kids and I'm looking at it and I'm like, how many of you?
Do you want to know another scary one?
Yeah.
1 out of 5.
Mm.
1 out of 5 of your kiddos seriously contemplate suicide.
So how do we, so let me maybe go a step before the contemplating or the actual completion of suicide. What are the conversations that need to be had?
Yeah.
If we're looking at 1 out of every 5,
The preventative piece
the preventative
of it,
piece of
look like?
that, because you said you do post, pre, what does that look
Right.
like?
So, Brittany, I heard you in the finishing up the other podcast, and you were really touching on the things. And it is as simple. It's very simple, but it's not easy, right? Communication. Just sitting there and talking, giving somebody your time. And with our youth, let's think about our youth right now. How often can you have an eyeball to eyeball conversation with them? How uncomfortable is it for them to look you in your eyes, right?
Yeah.
They're being brought up in a generation of technology. Okay. So teaching. When I say teaching, I mean carrying ourselves in a way that they can learn from our actions, not what we say, right? Our actions show that we are looking them in the eyeballs. Our actions show that we are taking our time out, putting down the phones, putting down all of that other stuff, right? And just being just like we are right now, having this open, honest conversation. We need to be able to talk to our youth just like you and I are talking right now. They are not dumb. And sometimes I feel like, oh, they're a kid. We can't say this. We can't do this. If we do, they're going to think of it. Fill in the blank. And it's like, they've already thought of it. It's already there, right? Our world has showed them so much at such a young age that if we can't learn to have open, honest conversations with our youth, that number will continue to go down. Because that number in 2013 was not 14. It was 15 to 16. So look at where we're at now, and the number's creeping down.
And when you talk about the world of technology, I was doing, when we did one of our episodes and we talked about suicide, I was like thinking about that. I graduated in 87, and I don't remember a suicide in my school. I'm from Florida, and our schools were in the thousands. Like some of these smaller counties, you have like 1,000. I think there was over 2,000 kids. There was over 800 kids in my graduating class. I don't think we lost a single one of them to suicide. If we did, I don't have any idea because they didn't talk about it. Because I'm like racking my brain. And I'm like, man, did I know of anybody that even struggled with that? So I think for some of our older, like myself, I have, my children, and then I have grandchildren, and I may live to the point where I see great grandchildren. So because it wasn't something that we came up with, we don't really know how to cross the threshold of conversation to go up to someone and say, how are you feeling?
That culture is so different.
Yeah, it is different.
And even for me, I'm sorry.
No,
I'm going to make you feel old for a minute. Maybe I graduated in 2010. But
She
even
did.
then,
You did.
I did. No, but even then, I mean, like thinking back, it wasn't as prevalent a conversation as it is now. And I think that it is due to TikTok and Facebook and Instagram, and people are so open with their lives.
Don't
and
forget
that's
the video games.
And the video games, that's just perpetuating violence, in my
Yes.
personal opinion. I think that
you can come back alive real quick.
Yeah. And
like you can just buy a life or, whatever.
There's
and it's
there's like a lack of regard for human life to me. That just, it's so sad.
So we're having the conversation.
Hmm.
Here's a question that we had on here. What would you say to someone who said they missed the signs?
So I'm that person. Okay. Let's back up to something that you had said. I can't really verbatim recall what it was, but the percentile is 80% of individuals that die by suicide. Social media, note left, maybe have been talking to a therapist and talked about suicide. Like it wasn't, I don't, it's always a shock when somebody dies from suicide, right? But it wasn't just like a total shock where you had no idea. So there's 80% that die by suicide that have attempts and, past attempts and all those things. Then there's 20%, and that's where I lie. There's 20% of individuals that die by suicide that there weren't those major like poster signs, like if somebody's depressed or all alone and, giving away prized possessions, like all of those things, right? Um, there's 20% of individuals that there's a low key like sign. Like, for example, Hannah's was the only thing that we can think of is 2 weeks prior to her death. She had a best friend since first grade. I mean, they were thick, like always together, right? Always together, did everything together. They were growing up together, and she was on her friend's bed, and her friend to this day is, I mean, she's messed up about it. And they were just having girl talk. And out of the blue, Hannah just said mid sentence, "Would you miss me if I were gone?"
Mm.
That's the only thing that we can say there was a sign. So you better believe every time I teach QPR, my suicide prevention training, I mention that because I don't blame her best friend at all. We didn't know what we didn't know,
Right.
Yeah.
right? Hannah did not let us in. I have no idea what her thought process was at all. I mean, I did a prison search in her room. Like prison guards would be they might want to hire me. Pulled up carpet, looked in the mattress,
I'm sure
went
you're
through,
desperate. You're
right,
desperate
went
to
through
figure it
every
out.
single piece of paper. Us girls.
Yeah.
She still had notebooks from Woodrow Wilson, writing her name, her middle name, and his last name,
Mhm. Yeah.
like that kind of stuff. That was in there. Not one time in any of those papers did I see, I want to die? I don't want to be here. None of that, right? So she was of that 20%. So we have things set for the 80%, right? The 80% are seeing counselors. The 80% are, have gotten help at some point in time. It might not be working, might not be the proper help. They might not be properly diagnosed, all of the above. And we still might lose, and we do. But that 20%, what are those signs and symptoms? It's different. Suicide doesn't discriminate. I don't care who you are,
Right.
what you have, what color, what demographic, anything, fill in the blank. It does mental health. That's what it boils down to.
So how do you consolidate that as a parent who did the prison search, who pulled the carpet, who read every note, every sticky, went through everything, and at the end of it, my daughter's gone and I still don't know why?
A few months after her death and doing all that, what made it well with my soul. Your mind is kind to you, and I believe that things are revealed to you in due time,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? Um, and after some thought and starting on my healing journey by helping other people, whatever it was for me. And I say what makes it well with my soul because I'm not okay that Hannah's gone, right? Um, but I've accepted it and it is well with my soul. And the reason why I do what I do today is because of that silent battle she had. I believe wholeheartedly that she had an internal struggle that she could not talk about. So, which leads me to the word stigma.
Mm.
So that's why I work so hard in talking about, teaching people how to talk. It's okay not to be okay. We're not supposed to be okay all the time,
Yeah.
right? All of those things, because everything points to that, right? She wasn't bullied. All of those other things, we can talk about all of that, but there's no facts behind that. The only thing that makes sense and the only thing that made it well within my soul was to know that she fought a silent battle, which completely breaks me in two. That she hurt that bad at the age of 15 to think that death was her only option, right? Fast forward to now, knowing what I know about mental health is that she very well could have had the onset of a grave mental health illness. But we don't know that for sure.
Yeah.
But maybe, right? So all of that together, brings me still back to the word of stigma. She didn't let anybody know.
Was that something that you talked about? Did you talk about not just even suicide, but just emotions or just mental health in general? Like, was it a topic of conversation within the walls of your home
Beforehand or after?
before?
No, not at all. So that is why, just even that little, would you miss me if I were gone type thing. Absolutely not. Not that I was that person that was just like, oh, get away from me if you have a mental health illness, like people do.
Yeah.
They act like that it's going to jump off of me and stick to you. They do.
Yeah, they do.
No, we didn't have those conversations. But I can tell you so many things about Hannah's death that changed me. And one of the greatest changes is my parenting, which, let's take that a step further, me just simply being a human, how I view life, the love for life, that I have today. It's not that I didn't, but I didn't understand as I understand today, So my youngest daughter, she is 16 right now, and she wishes I would shut up sometimes. She's like, she's even said it. Mom, I would rather you just like take something away from me or spank me
Than to kill me with the
than to
speech.
just stop talking.
Yeah.
Like,
Stop making eye contact.
Right. Like, I don't want to talk about this anymore,
Yeah.
So we do talk about those types of things.
What
now.
do you feel like, to parents or people who are watching this who just don't know how to start those conversations? What are some words of encouragement that you would give them to kind of open the door for those conversations?
Great question. Because we get scared, right?
Yeah.
Why do we get scared? Why is fear even there? It's because we don't know, right? And as parents, we think, it's our job to protect. And then if something like this happens, it's our fault that this happened, right? Or if they stray away, it's our fault that they strayed away because we weren't good enough,
Right.
fill in that.
Mm-hmm.
So just saying that all parents feel that way, just so everybody can hear that. Sometimes it's like, I need permission from somebody to do so, even though I know something's right. Sometimes I still need that permission, like, oh yeah. So hear that first and foremost. We all struggle as parents with that. But seek somebody out. I am a firm believer in it. And the reason why is because I utilize this in my own life. Find somebody in your life is going through or has gone through what you're about to. Okay. Ask questions. That was never taught. I was never taught growing up to ask questions, right? Even generations before that, you didn't dare ask questions.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Jovi, you were saying like when you went to school, like you didn't know of anybody and you had thousands of kids, right? I guarantee there were suicides, right? Not as much as now, right? But if we're looking biblically, suicide has been around since the beginning of time, right? So it's always been there, but not talked about.
Yeah.
right? So why do we have more suicide now? We have more people, we have more problems, we have to fill in the blank. That's why we have more suicide now. But as far as the parents or caregiver, anybody that's with children, or it doesn't even just have to be children, just other humans.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
How do you start that conversation? Talk to somebody else about it. Get comfortable or get uncomfortable. I like to say get uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Just say it. I use this all the time. I may not know and I may offend you, or, the more real you are with a person, authentic, the more that wall's going to come down. Being like, man, I'm really nervous right now. I'm really nervous, but I've noticed that you have been doing this and I'm scared. So I want to ask you some questions and it might come out wrong, but I love you. I care for you. I value you. Are you thinking about taking your life? Are you struggling? Those types of things. I
Yeah.
like to say, let's get away from pussyfooting.
Yeah.
Beating around the bush. We can't do it. We can't do that. Studies show, and these are real, I've worked in it. Studies show the more bold and blunt you can be, the more lives. You're saving time. Are you struggling enough that, you're thinking about taking your life? And if you can tell somebody that you're scared to ask that question because you're scared of what the answer is, but if you can also say, I am scared and I'm nervous, but that comes from a caring place, even if the answer is yes, I'm going to be right here.
Yeah.
If it has to look like that, the more you get comfortable. I mean, I've asked that question. I've introduced those types of topics and conversations. I still get nervous. Because what happens if that person that I'm talking to eventually does end up taking their life? Could I have done some,
Yeah.
all of that stuff comes in. But the facts are suicide is going to be here.
Yeah.
We are not going to be able to erase it,
Yeah.
but it doesn't have to be the second leading cause of death.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what it does. It's the most preventable death there is.
So, what sort of resources are out there for people who have lost a loved one to suicide, people who are contemplating suicide and watching this? Where do you point them when they come to you with those questions?
So, two totally different things there, because individuals that have lost a loved one to suicide versus an individual that is contemplating suicide, we kind of don't want to mix the two.
Yeah.
Because you have no idea who you're dealing with the person, at what stage they're at with the person that has
Absolutely.
lost a loved one. So the person that has lost a loved one, please send them our way. We have grief support groups. We have one in Sullivan County. We have one in Vigo County, right? And we have counseling services. That's why we do the wonderful color event
Yeah.
that everybody loves in May, and the smaller scale fundraisers that we do to raise that money to be able to pay for individuals' mental health services, right? And then we were talking about the wellness program, the physical health part of it. How about your gut health? All of those types of things play. There are so many studies directly linking your gut to your mind.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, it's amazing. I'm
Yeah.
on that journey myself right now. Right now, not doing so hot with it. Okay.
But you're on it. But you're
I'm
on the
on
journey.
it,
You're on
man.
the
That
road.
sugar. Woo! I want sugar with everything.
Amen, girl. Sugar in my coffee, sugar in
Yeah,
my
right.
sweets.
Sugar in
Everything.
my water, but
Yeah.
whatever.
I just want a slice of cake all the time. But as far as resources, there are counseling. We have agencies here, mental health agencies. We have churches. Really, it is what works for me may not work for you, Brittany.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So taking that time to sit down with them, ask them what they have already done. Key question. Have you been in this situation before? Okay. If the answer is yes, okay. What didn't work the last time that why we're sitting here?
Again.
Okay. Because I'm going to
Yeah.
tell you, they're already in distress.
Mm-hmm.
And if you bring up a resource that they've already been to and it was a horrific, you've just taken them from 9 to 20.
Yeah.
Right. And you're showing them that you truly care, that you're invested in their next steps. Right. And most of the time, I'm a glorified resource finder. So if you get stuck, call me. I don't always have the answers, but I'll tell you, I'll help.
Yeah.
I'll try, and reach out to local places like that. That goes back to that ask questions. If you don't know, what's the harm of calling Hamilton Center and saying, I don't know. Can you direct me? I have this.
Yeah.
Calling Harsha, calling Union Hospital, Regional Hospital, any of those. If you don't know a direct service, make a phone call.
Yeah.
Take that action. You might not find it there, but you just might.
Yeah.
Same thing for the individual that's struggling with suicidal ideations. That's a little bit different because just because someone's having thoughts of suicide does not mean that they're suicidal.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay. That is a big misconception. Okay. Because sometimes when people don't want to admit it because they're afraid they're going to get locked up, right? That's what you hear. I don't want to be locked up.
That's part of the stigma.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're afraid to even tell you what some of their thoughts are. If we're all honest, sitting at this table right now, there's been times in our life that we've had the thoughts of, I don't want to wake up, or I wish I weren't born, or I wish I weren't here, something, because those feelings have been so overwhelming and things like that. That doesn't mean that we were suicidal. That means that we were dealing with something really heavy that we had no idea what the next steps were.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So normalizing that type of conversation and making people feel okay with not being okay.
Yeah.
Right?
Breaking that stigma.
Because then they clam up, right? Then the problem escalates when it didn't have to get all the way up here, when it could have just been settled with a simple conversation that might not have been easy, but simple.
But needed.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, taken to the proper channels of, professional help.
Yeah.
Does that help? Did that
Yeah.
answer
Oh
that?
my gosh.
Sometimes
surely
I go
did.
off into
Yeah.
left
No,
field,
it was
ladies.
so
That's
good.
And
Thank you. 'Cause
Like,
I
we're
know-
going to continue the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
After. Christina, thank you so much.
Mhm.
Thank you so much. I have a feeling we're going to see you again.
Yes.
Yay.
Because there's
Thank
such
you.
a depth to this
Mhm.
that I think if people are still feeling stigmatized by confessing, our
Mhm.
hope is that this podcast will allow them to have the conversation
Yeah.
Mhm.
that they've been wanting to have,
Yeah.
that have not found a place to have it.
Right.
So if you're open, we'll get you
Yeah.
back in here and we'll continue.
Yeah. In any conversation, I want to leave with this: less is more. We think when we're having a conversation, we have to have these profound words with somebody, and we do not.
Yeah.
I don't want you to talk to me like you're a clinician. I don't want you to have these profound, I want you to be a human with me,
Yeah.
Less is more.
Less is more.
Thank you so much.
Gosh.
Thank you.
Thank you.